Hello there. Today I'm taking a look at a second red wine from Orlando, from South Australia. And although Orlando are famous for making wines in the Barossa Valley, this is actually a Cabernet Sauvignon from Coonawarra. This is their Jacaranda Ridge, and it's the 2016 vintage of this. So Orlando were established in 1874, and that's when Johann Gramp was given the Orlando vineyard in the southern Barossa Valley in Rowland Flatt as a wedding present. The Gramp family had come to this part of the Barossa Valley and set up a vineyard in 1847. And in fact, they produced their first wine in 1850 with a barrel-aged hock that evidently proved very successful. Their first vineyard had been planted next to a small stream it's called Jacob's Creek. During the 1950s and 60s, Orlando were probably one of the most innovative wine companies in South Australia. In the early 50s, they pioneered the idea of cool fermenting Riesling, producing fresh, elegant, light, white wines that were quite revolutionary at the time. In 1956, they purchased pressure tanks from Germany and started producing affordable, good quality, tank fermented sparkling wine. Their brand Barossa Pearl became very popular. In 1962, they started to develop the Steingarten vineyard, a Riesling vineyard planted at altitude in the cool of the Eden Valley. Again, that proved a very popular brand. However, by 1961, the family had overextended themselves financially, and there was a certain amount of relief when Reckitt Colman made them an offer for their company that they couldn't resist. Now, Reckitt Colman started to develop an Australian wine brand, which they called Jacob's Creek. The first vintage of that came in 1976. However, in 1988, a group of 4 former directors of the company, with the support and backing of the Australian government, purchased Orlando back from Reckitt Colman. However, they only held on to it for a year before going on to sell it to Pernod Ricard, the French wine and spirits group, with the idea that they were better placed with their international distribution system to develop the Jacob's Creek brand. And they did this incredibly successfully, to the extent that actually things swapped over and Jacob's Creek became the primary brand, and actually the Orlando brand was put into abeyance. And in fact, it wasn't until 2020 that Orlando was re-established as a brand within the Pernod Ricard group. Earlier in this year, 2024, Jacob's Creek, Orlando, a number of other Australian, New Zealand and Spanish wineries belonging to Pernod Ricard were all sold to another group called Accolade. So we await with some eagerness the chance to see how those brands will fare under new ownership. So to the Jacaranda Ridge Cabernet Sauvignon. Evidently the fruit for this wine all comes from a single block on the Flint family vineyard, which lies in the northern part of Coonawarra. I have seen the suggestion that there's possibly up to 7% of Shiraz going into the blend of this, but I've not seen that confirmed anywhere. But it wouldn't be unusual to put a little bit of Shiraz in with a Cabernet Sauvignon, just to give it a little bit more richness and mid-palate body. In 2016, picking took place on the 29th of March. And the fruit was fully destemmed, was crushed and put into a small static fermenter. Maceration there went on for 12 days, during which period the winemaking team were tasting this twice a day, just so that they could monitor the uptake of tannins, colours and flavours, to ensure that the regime of pump-overs wasn't too extractive. And this could be regulated by varying the frequency of pump-overs and their duration. Temperature control was used and fermentation temperatures were kept between 20 and 28 degrees C. Again, that's keeping them relatively low, helping to emphasise aromas. Fermentation was instigated with a cultured yeast, and the idea of that was to ensure a clean fermentation and to enable the fruit to really sing. Subsequently, only the free-run juice was selected to go into this wine. The pressed juice was avoided to prevent astringent tannins that had come from the grape seeds from making their way into the wine. Aging went on in French oak hogsheads and puncheons, so relatively large barrels. The notes I've seen don't give any indication as to what proportion of the oak used was new and what was seasoned. Barrel aging went on for 16 months. So let's have a look at the wine, shall we? There's a really good depth of colour, there's a nice intensity. I really can't make out the stem of the glass as I look down through the wine. The wine has a sort of a deep dark black ruby colour. There's hints of a red purple at the rim, but it's really holding its deep colour right up to the rim. The wine has 14.5% alcohol, so unsurprisingly is forming some relatively obvious tears running down the glass there. It also sort of seems to be staining the glass a little, such as the intensity of the pigmentation in there. So let's see what we make of the aromas, shall we? At first the aromas seem a little restrained. However, as you look, there is a sort of quite a clean blackcurranty cassis note, perhaps touches of red currant. There are overlaying notes of sort of slightly cedary oak. There are hints of mint. And while the dark fruit is a little closed, there are some quite elegant, delicate aromas just showing themselves. So let's have a taste. On the palate there are notes of cassis and mint. The cassis is emphasised by an acidity that comes through the fruit. The cassis is emphasised, but only as the acidity forces its way through what is actually quite dense, finely structured fruit on the mid-palate. There's really quite an intense black fruit there, with cedary and vanilla-y structural notes. The alcohol seems fairly well balanced, but just at the edges of my tongue, where I'm getting some acidity as well, there's also quite a bit of sort of warmth and some oak spices, some sweet spices from the oak coming through there. There are cinnamon notes, hints of nutmeg. On the middle of my tongue there's plenty of vanilla. There are some slightly chocolatey flavours. There are cocoa flavours and a sort of a chocolatey texture. The wine is a medium to full body, and although the fruit is to the fore, I think there's actually some quite good acidity there. Although it's behind the fruit and it's lifting it, and it's sort of helping to lift the aromas. The wine has a density, and actually it's got a breadth that makes me think that it's highly probable that there is that small proportion of Shiraz in there that has been suggested. And there is a slight leathery note as well, which again suggests more of the presence of Shiraz to me than Cabernet Sauvignon. But it's certainly not dominating the flavours. I think this is quite a good example of a Coonawarra Cabernet Sauvignon. It's reasonably elegant, it has some good depth, it has lovely intensity. I think it's a wine that needs a little bit of time to open, 3 or 4 years maybe. The winemakers suggest on the back label this is a wine that would age for 20 years. I think it would certainly repay 4 or 5 years keeping and probably be at some of its best drinking at about 8 to 10 years old, when hopefully it will have lost some of its sort of sulky brooding nature and will be showing us a little bit more of the fresh energetic fruit that's quite clearly in there. Taking a look at our aggregated critics score for this wine, I'm not sure how much of an aggregation it is. I think there's just one score there, but this is coming out at 88 out of 100. Maybe the wine's intensity and richness would suggest that it's capable of exceeding that mark, but just at the moment its brooding nature seems to be holding it back a bit. So I don't think that's a particularly unfair mark. That having been said, in the scale of Coonawarra Cabernets, this is not a hugely expensive wine. It's certainly not a cheap wine, but it's a relatively affordable example. And I think it has good balance, good intensity, and the ability to age. So if you like this sort of slightly rich, New World style of cooler climate Cabernet Sauvignon, I think this could well be a wine that would interest you. Thank you so much for joining us. I do hope you've enjoyed the tasting. If you have, do please press the like button. If you would like to sign up and follow our channel, we'd really appreciate that. That would be fantastic to have your support there, and that way you can set yourself an alert and you'll be notified every time we publish a new video. If you have any comments, please pop those in the comments box below. It'd be fantastic to hear what you have to say about the wines, the tastings we're doing, or anything else related to that. I will leave a link to the page that Wine Searcher has for this wine in this vintage on our website, and that way you can use that to find out about pricing and availability in retail shops near you. You can also use the tabs across the top of that page to find out about the wine's background, its regions, its grape variety, its producer, You can look at what the critics have to say. You can see other users' views on the wine. You can see any awards it's won. You can see its price history, and you can compare vintages. So hopefully we've managed to assemble all the information you'd need there to make a reasonably well-informed decision about maybe purchasing the wine. So thank you so much again for joining us, and I do hope you'll manage to make some time and come and join us for another tasting in the very near future. Till then, bye for now.